There's a piece of mail that can shrink your paycheck without a single person at your job ever signing off on it. It shows up in your mailbox once a year, and most people file it away without reading past the opening line. Selena got a raise in January. By March, she was worse off than before it arrived. She handles employee benefits for a logistics company just outside Columbus, which means her actual job is explaining insurance coverage to other people. Her own raise came out to a 3% bump, effective the very first pay period. She snapped a photo of the letter and sent it to her daughter, Ren, who had just graduated college. Then the rest of the mail started showing up. Her mortgage company wanted an extra $84 a month. Her health plan shifted the deductible. Her homeowner's insurance renewed at a figure she had to read twice to believe. None of it was an error. Every single letter was accurate, courteous, and required by law. By March, she'd effectively taken a pay cut, even though technically, nobody had cut her pay at all. This is what the squeeze actually looks like in real life. It isn't a foreclosure notice on the evening news. It's a woman with a raise, a steady job, and a paid-for house, sitting at her kitchen table with a calculator, not liking what it's telling her. I'm Yank, and on this channel we take financial headlines apart and check the underlying math ourselves, because the headline is almost never what's actually happening to you. If this video is landing for you, a like and a subscribe costs nothing and helps a lot. Before we go any further, 2 dates, because the middle class is being wiped out, needs a calendar attached to it or it's just noise, this fall, and 2032. One of those dates puts a 15% claim on millions of paychecks without a single judge ever signing off on it. The other quietly pulls $500 a month out of the average retirement check, automatically, with nobody voting on it. We'll get to both of those. But to understand why those specific dates matter, you need to understand something that's been happening quietly for 40 years, and it starts with a definition that's broken. Pew defines middle class as a household earning between 2/3 and double the national median income. In today's dollars, for a household of 3, that's roughly $54,700 on the low end and $163,200 on the high end. A family scraping by on $55,000 a year and a family clearing $160,000 a year are, officially, in the exact same class. That's not a meaningful category, that's a shrug wearing a spreadsheet. And here's the statistic everyone repeats, this group is shrinking. In 1971, 61% of American adults lived in a middle-class household. By 2023, that number was 51%. Except here's the part the doom and gloom videos leave out, and I'm telling you now so you'll trust me later, most of the people who left the middle class moved up, not down. The share of Americans in the upper income bracket nearly doubled. The share in the lower bracket barely budged. Look only at that migration, and this is a story about Americans getting richer. So why doesn't it feel that way? Because the real answer has almost nothing to do with your income. Here's the frame to carry through the rest of this video: the middle class was never really an income bracket. It was a risk-sharing arrangement. Think about what actually made your parents middle class. Sure, there was a paycheck, but underneath that paycheck sat 4 things they almost never had to think about: housing, which one income alone could carry, health care, which an employer absorbed the cost of, retirement, where someone else was contractually obligated to make good on the promise, and education, which didn't require a 30-year loan to pay for. Those weren't perks. Those were the load-bearing walls of the whole arrangement. Somebody else was holding the risk for you. So who's holding it now? You are. All 4 of those things have been quietly handed over to you. You still get the paycheck, you also now get the deductible, the escrow adjustment, the market risk, and the loan restructuring. And nobody calls a meeting to tell you, because it doesn't happen in a meeting. It happens in envelopes. In Selena's case, roughly 11 of them, from 11 different companies, over about 14 months, every single one perfectly, boringly correct. A pay cut usually arrives once, and you notice. This kind arrives in installments, and each installment is somebody else's completely reasonable business decision. I won't walk you through all 11. Here are the 4 that did the most damage. Let's start with the biggest one. Selena's brother, Foster, is 58 and installs air conditioning for a living, working for himself. Last July, he was flat on his back in a crawl space outside Dayton, phone propped against a floor joist, doing math between jobs because it was the only free 20 minutes he'd get all day. It was 104 degrees under that house. There were spiders. And the number glowing on his phone screen was what it would cost to keep his family insured for a single year. Foster is exactly the guy people point to when this topic comes up: learn a trade. Fair enough, a language model can't crawl under a house in August. His labor is about as future-proof as labor gets. And he's still the most financially exposed person in this entire story, because when you work for yourself, you find out exactly what your benefits actually cost. Do you know what yours cost you? The average family health insurance premium in this country runs about $26,993 a year. You personally pay roughly $6,850 of that out of your paycheck. Your employer covers the rest. That rest isn't a gift, it's your own compensation, rerouted around your bank account and spent on your behalf, at a price you had zero say in negotiating. Something close to $20,000 a year of your pay is being handled for you without your input, and that amount has been outpacing wage growth for 2 decades. This year, benefits consultants are projecting the steepest premium jump in 15 years. And if you buy your own coverage, like Foster does, like roughly 20 million other Americans do, the picture is worse. The enhanced subsidies expired at the end of last year. Premium payments for subsidized enrollees have roughly doubled, and deductibles climbed by another $1,000 or so on top of that. When you can't absorb the premium increase, you buy the plan that hurts you later instead of the one that hurts you now. You don't drop coverage, you just move the pain somewhere you can't see it yet. Foster's takeaway, straight from that crawl space: he now pays more to insure himself than he pays to insure the truck he's lying under. That's envelope 1. 10 more to go. Here's the one that actually kicked off this whole video. Picture Selena's kitchen table on a Tuesday in February. An escrow analysis sits in front of her. She's on her phone's calculator app, restarting the calculation over and over because she keeps fumbling the totals. Her mortgage is fixed rate. Lock the rate, sleep well, let inflation slowly erode the real cost of the payment. That was supposed to be the entire point of a fixed mortgage. Her rate is fixed. Her actual housing cost is not. Homeowners insurance now makes up about 9% of the average monthly mortgage payment once you combine principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, the highest share ever recorded. And premiums rose in 95% of American zip codes between 2021 and 2024. Not just the coastal ones. Not just the wildfire-prone ones. 95% of all of them, which is the point where it stops being a risk premium and starts being a subscription. Meanwhile, property tax bills are up more than 27% since 2019, and deductibles jumped 22% in a single year. Same policy, same house, less coverage, for more money. Which means about 1 month out of every 11, you're working purely to pay a company whose entire core competency is finding a reason your claim doesn't apply. You signed up for a fixed-rate loan and ended up with a variable-rate life. And the increase never arrives as a bill, it arrives as an escrow adjustment, which might be the only piece of mail in America that can cut your take-home pay without ever going through HR. That's if you already own. If you rent, is the door any easier to walk through? No. Harvard's Housing Research Center found that out of 46 million American renters, only about 6 million can actually afford a median-priced home on standard first-time buyer terms. 6 out of 46. So if you've been quietly wondering whether you're the problem here, you're not. Ren is one of the 40, and she hasn't even gotten started yet. On top of that, roughly a quarter of all home purchases are now all cash. So when you lose a bidding war, you're often not losing to a family with a sharper mortgage broker, you're losing to someone who simply doesn't need a bank in the room at all. Now notice something about every envelope so far, not one of them shows up looking like a pay cut. So what's been quietly absorbing the difference? Debt has. Total household debt in this country sits around $18.8 trillion, but the total number isn't really the story. What it's made of is the story. Auto loans are the clearest tell. The average new car payment just hit a record $770 a month, which amounts to rent in a good chunk of this country. Selena's own car has 140,000 miles on it, and she's planning on keeping it that way. She's run the numbers on replacing it 4 separate times and put the phone down all 4 times. Meanwhile, the share of auto loan balances that are 90 or more days past due hit 5.6% this spring, higher than the previous record of 5.3%, which was set in the wreckage of 2008. More Americans are seriously behind on their car payments right now than were behind after the housing collapse. And a car payment is the very last thing people let slip, because the car is how you get to the job that pays for the car. Foster's truck isn't a lifestyle choice, it's literally his business. When that payment starts slipping for millions of households simultaneously, it's not telling you people got careless. It's telling you the last thing they were willing to give up has finally reached the front of the line. Now, I promised I'd check the math, so here's the wrinkle. The New York Fed, whose data this actually is, described that same quarter as broadly steady. A borrower advocacy group read the exact same release and called it record financial distress. So which one is it? Honestly, both. Same numbers, both readings correct. The national average looks calm because the top of the income distribution is calm, and the top is now large enough to hold the whole national average up by itself. That's not really a disagreement about the data, that's the actual problem showing up inside the data. Underneath that calm average, credit card balances are up almost 6% year over year, with delinquency rates at their highest point in 16 years. For a lot of households, the emergency fund has quietly become a piece of plastic carrying a 20+% interest rate. Credit has been the shock absorber sitting between flat wages and rising fixed costs for about 15 years, it's what let the monthly arithmetic keep working. But shock absorbers have a limited amount of travel, and this one is bottoming out. Which brings us to Ren. It's 11 at night, she's in her mother's spare room, laptop balanced on a stack of textbooks the campus bookstore refused to buy back. Application number 215, same resume, different company. She stopped writing cover letters that used the word passion somewhere around application 90. She's 23, graduated this past spring, and currently works part-time somewhere that doesn't even require the degree she's still paying off. Here's what makes her situation different from any recession you've personally lived through: nobody fired her. There was never a job there to be fired from in the first place. The most recent jobs report showed payrolls fell by 23,000 in July. Economists had expected a gain of somewhere between 80,000 and 95,000. And the unemployment rate actually went down, from 4.2% to 4.1%. That is not good news, it's close to the opposite. The rate fell because people stopped looking for work. Labor force participation dropped to 61.4%, the lowest level since early 2021, and the number of Americans actually holding a job is down more than 830,000 this year. Give up on the job search entirely, and you stop counting as unemployed. Statistically, you just vanish. The chief economist at Navy Federal put it plainly: the rate fell for the wrong reasons. Everyone wants to pin this on artificial intelligence. Is AI actually taking these jobs? Mostly, not yet, and the honest picture is more interesting than the panic. The specific occupations named as AI's casualties have actually grown in headcount. There are more software developers than in 2022, more radiologists, more paralegals. What's actually happening is quieter than that. Entry-level hiring at large technology companies has collapsed to around 7% of new hires, down more than half from before the pandemic. Brookings research suggests more than half the tasks inside an entry-level role are automatable, about 5 times the exposure of a senior role. So when those tasks disappear, nobody gets hired to handle what's left. The work just gets handed upward to whoever's already inside the building, which feels like job security right up until you notice you're doing the work of two people for the pay of one. Nobody's cutting the ladder. They're just quietly removing the bottom rung and leaving the rest of it hanging there, perfectly intact, right at chest height. Okay, I've been building one side of this case for a while, so let me build the other side properly, because there is a serious counterargument. Foster and Selena's father is the way into it. Same trade Foster works in now, one income, 4 kids, a house in the same county Foster still lives in. And by nearly every measure you can put on paper, Foster out-earns him. That's not nostalgia talking, that's the actual data. A rigorous analysis from the American Enterprise Institute found that median family income, adjusted for inflation and family size, rose about 52% between 1979 and 2024. Families at the 10th percentile were roughly 30% better off. Their conclusion was blunt: there was no net movement of families downward out of the core middle class. That's not spin, and if you want to argue with it, you'd better argue with it honestly. So here's the honest argument. Their father had a pension, a union health plan, and a mortgage priced for a single income. In 40 years of work, he never once had to think about a deductible, a 401k rollover, an expense ratio, or an escrow analysis. Both of his kids out-earn him, and both of them personally carry every single one of those risks he never had to touch. Your income really did go up too, by roughly half over 4.5 decades. But over that same stretch, childcare costs rose more than 200%, prescription drug costs rose about 175%, and higher education costs rose close to 400%. So you didn't just get a 52% raise, you got a 52% raise and an invoice for 300%. And yes, household net worth genuinely is at a record high. But that's an asset price record, which is a completely different animal from a paycheck record. The bottom half of American households owns roughly 1% of all stocks and mutual fund shares combined. The top 10% owns close to 90% of them. So when a headline announces that household wealth just hit an all-time high, the household being described isn't yours, it's somebody else's, and you're simply being invited to feel represented by it. You didn't get poorer. You got less insured. Those are two different injuries, and only one of them ever shows up in the income data. The cleanest place to actually watch this play out is your retirement account. Vanguard just published data covering roughly 4.6 million of them. The average 401k balance came in at $167,970, a record high, and every outlet ran with that number. The median balance, in the exact same accounts, in the exact same year, was $44,115. The average describes a person who doesn't really exist, a mathematical ghost created by a small number of enormous balances standing next to a huge number of small ones. So which number are you actually being measured against? Narrow it down to ages 55 to 64, the average is about $305,000, and the median is $107,269. Roughly a quarter of Gen X savers currently have a loan outstanding against their own balance, the highest rate of any generation, which tells you the retirement account has quietly been repurposed into an emergency fund. Only about 45% of American workers even have access to a workplace retirement plan in the first place. Ren isn't one of them. Part-time work rarely comes with one attached. So the single most valuable decade of compounding she'll ever get in her life is passing by with nowhere for her to put it. And this is where Selena's raise finally resolves. A 3% raise on $96,000 works out to about $2,900 before tax. Her escrow adjustment alone took roughly $1,000 of that. Her share of the premium increase took more. Her deductible moved. Her grocery bill absorbed a tariff pass-through that economists put somewhere between $800 and $1,500 a year. She got a raise. She just never actually got to keep it, it was spoken for before it even arrived. I want to be direct with you here, because I think a lot of people watching this have been carrying this quietly on their own. If you're earning what your parents would have called serious money and you still feel like you're losing ground, you are not bad with money. Among households earning between $100,000 and $150,000 a year, the share living paycheck to paycheck out of necessity, not by choice, but because fixed costs eat the entire paycheck, doubled in a single year, to around 24%. 1 in 4 households at $100,000 a year. You didn't fail the test. The test changed while you were still taking it, and nobody bothered to collect the old version. Which finally brings us back to those 2 dates. The first one lands this fall. Wage garnishment on defaulted federal student loans restarts, and it can claim up to 15% of your disposable pay, with no court order required. The government doesn't need to sue you to start collecting from you. Roughly 7.7 million borrowers were already in default at the start of this year, and the Department of Education projects another 4 million could join them. The second date is 2032, when Social Security's Retirement Trust Fund is projected to run dry. Not the entire program, payroll taxes keep flowing in regardless, but revenue alone would only cover about 78% of scheduled benefits, which triggers an automatic, across-the-board 22% cut, roughly $500 a month off a typical check. 6 years from now. Foster is 58 today, he'll be 64 then, 1 year short of the age he spent his entire working life calling retirement. He isn't planning around some hypothetical. He's planning around a scheduled event that Congress has known about for decades and has treated with all the urgency of a man watching a slow leak from across the room. Quick note before we get to what you can actually do about all this. I run a school community where a group of us build income that isn't tied to any single employer's headcount decisions, mostly faceless YouTube channels, because that's what I actually know how to teach. It's people posting their real numbers and getting told honestly when they're wrong. Links are below if that sounds like your kind of room. So what actually works here? 2 things, and neither one is exciting, which is exactly why they work. First, price out your total housing cost, not just your mortgage payment. Pull your last 2 escrow analyses, calculate the rate of change, and assume it continues. If you only budget for the fixed number, you'll get ambushed by the variable one every February. Second, and this is the one that really matters, get onto the ownership side of something, however small. Not because index funds are magic, but because every divide in this entire video runs along one single line, whether your money comes only from your labor, or also from things that keep paying you while you sleep. Quick disclaimer, I'm not a financial advisor. None of this is personalized advice, and your specific situation has details I simply can't see from here. Take the framework, check my numbers yourself, and talk to someone who's actually looking at your accounts. So here's where I land on all of this. The middle class isn't being wiped out by some crash. Crashes are loud. They end, and afterwards somebody writes a book about them. This is quieter, and honestly worse. It's the slow conversion of a wage into a pile of obligations, and the slow conversion of a shared arrangement into a private one. Selena has a raise, a mortgage, and a job spent explaining benefits to people who can't afford their own. Foster has a truck, a trade, and a countdown clock. And Ren, who sent out 215 applications from a spare bedroom, finally got a callback last month, part-time, no benefits, no real plan attached. She took it, because you take it. Her grandfather got a pension for the exact same kind of work. Nobody repealed it. It just quietly stopped being included. So go look at whatever came in your mail this month. Not the balance, the terms. And then ask yourself what you actually own, besides the payments.